Hey there, YouTube. Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the podcast of the Fractal Journal called Odd Iteration. This is the second episode where I'm going to be talking about neurology and psychology to the best of my ability. I'm a layman, and I love reading books like Antonio Damasio's The Feeling of What Happens, which is where I've gotten a lot of my ideas. And let's rock and roll here. I've had a couple of cups of coffee here at 11 p.m., which is how I kind of do it, and my goodness. So the lens of the self. Last video I talked about philosophy and science and their relationship, how they're complementary and not competing disciplines, and how in order to do either one of them with any degree of competence, you have to understand the lens of the self. Man is the measure of all things, or all things pass through the filter of us, so let's make sure that filter is squeaky clean. Towards that end, it's important to understand that the body and the mind are inextricably linked, and that's what Mr. Damasio has been talking about in his books for the past decade or so. Basically, he posited something called the somatic marker hypothesis, which is the idea that reasoning is aided and assisted by signaling from the body about various emotional states and physiological states. So say you have a bad experience in a particular house, your body has a certain physiological response. All of what had happened kind of gets encoded through a very big kind of lens there, and you start having, odd sensations and things and memories when you're in a similar environment later on down the road, even though you don't actually remember that environment. So you'll be having an off feeling without really understanding why. And the why is kind of that Freudian unconscious of, the unremembered experience. And William James kind of already was talking about the viscera and the milieu having to do with cognition, but Antonio Damasio took it a step further with the somatic marker hypothesis, in that he implicated not only, the viscera and stuff, but also the position of the body, etc. Just everything functions with this biofeedback loop. And the gut, from another author, I forget his name, is also, it has a lot of neurotransmitters and a lot of nerve endings. So gut and brain health and cognition are also tied. So there's just a lot to pay attention with the mind-body connection. But specifically, the somatic marker hypothesis is interesting because it points out that emotion is critical to proper reasoning, because we don't process things serially in a logical fashion, step by step, like a computer does, because that's not actually very effective for anything besides like mathematics. Because we don't do things that way. We do it in a parallel distributed way. We need decision parameters. Remember, the decision parameters comes from being this biological organism that has these emotional responses, and they serve as markers for certain stimuli and the ideas attendant to that stimuli, and that helps to make informed decisions. And so that whole Spock-like thing of being this awesome, cold, clear-headed scientist might actually be a bit further from the truth. And I think this is borne out by the history of science, which is a lot of flashes of insights from everything that I've come to understand about it. Of course, there's a lot of hard work and, detailed keeping track of things. But all in all, a lot of the ideation comes from functioning through analogy. Anyway, just a whole interesting set of things is opened up by focusing on the self through the lens of neurology, of understanding that you're a body and a mind, and the way that you do dialogue and come up with ideas is affected by that. For instance, Antonio Damasio in this book, The Feeling of What Happens, was talking about walking up the stairs to his study. On the stairs, there was a couple of pens, and he had a book and a cup of coffee, and he put the book here, transferred the cup of coffee to his left hand, and then he picked up the pen with the other hand, and he noticed that he was forming the contour to pick up the pen, and that he was doing that all very smoothly and very automatically. And, that muscle memory that he was using there is kind of the same that we shape towards ideas when we're processing ideas. We have a muscle memory for ideas, and we'd better refine that so that we're not just shooting sound bites at each other, and so that we're not having the wrong kind of emotional response to things which should really make us pause and think carefully but with engagement and excitement and attention, because it just leads to more fruitful discussions and things of that nature. And basically, that analogy of muscle memory that's really brought home by the whole neurology biology aspect is heartening, because it means as a musician can train, as an athlete can train, so you can train yourself to become a better thinker, a better speaker, a more patient communicator, and also bring into there, hey, it's important to stay excited about things and take the steps to do that, so that when you are looking at subject matter that's a little bit dry, you try to make it a little bit more entertaining, and you notice, wow, I can remember this a lot better. Because there was a concept that I had heard of called memory castles or something, where people in the past used to have to memorize a lot of stuff, and how they do it is by associating certain bits of information with a piece of an imaginary house or palace. And that kind of mnemonic thing, I mean, has been around for a while, people know about it, but we really need to be discussing that and bringing it more to the forefront in application to just everyday concepts and things. See, here's another thing that in this chapter that I just read, which kind of highlights everything that we know. It's like they did a test where people were given a story. One story had an emotional kind of effect to it, and the other one didn't, but they both had the same amount of facts. The emotional story got memorized and recalled a lot better than the one that didn't have any kind of attendant emotional stimuli, which is what lawyers and politicians and media people exploit all of the time. And, it's obviously a phenomenon that has to do with our biology as well as just the nature of ideas. And, yeah, that can be used for good or for ill. So, as I was saying, if you use that whole emotional, I think just like wonderful human way of assessing stuff to your advantage, and also are wary of the fact that people use it against you, you can really change your life and discussion and dialogue for the better. So this all is just very interesting stuff, and it's going to require more than one video because there's just so much to go over. In the next video, I think I'm going to look a little bit more closely at the Iowa gambling test or task, which is kind of what was used to derive a lot of the data for how people with impaired decision-making skills manifest their pathology, as well as a whole host of other things. And we'll probably stay on this subject for a good 4 or 5 videos, which I'll try to do at least one video a week. My ideal is to do about 3. But thanks for joining me. Comment below, correct me if I've said anything wrong. Thanks for stopping by. Subscribe if you like what you're seeing, and have a great time wherever time finds you. Goodbye.